Flexicap mutual funds is going to be what are these Flexicap mutual funds, what are the funds that you can actually go ahead and invest in. And to take this conversation ahead, we are joined by Mohit Gang, who is the co-founder and CEO of Moneyfront, joining us now. Mohit, hi, very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with us. My first question to you is, if somebody is going ahead and investing in a Flexicap mutual fund, what are the top 5 recommendations or top 5 mutual funds that according to you have performed the best in the past 5 years?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mahima. So look, I think on the FlexiCap side, there have been number of choices which have been available to the Indian investors for a pretty long while. And most of the funds have done reasonably well. However, if you were to ask me if I were to peg the funds on a 5-year scale, right, we're looking at a slightly longer term horizon out here in terms of performance and everything. I think the top picks would be HDFC FlexiCap Fund. Quant FlexiCap Fund, though, hasn't done that great in last 1 or 2 years, but the longer term performance still stands out and speaks for itself. In the recent additions, I think Helios and Motilal FlexiCap Fund are the good ones. Over a longer period, if I have to look in, then I will add perhaps a Franklin FlexiCap Fund, Edelweiss FlexiCap, and a Parag Parikh FlexiCap. So in pecking order, I think it would be HDFC, Quant, Franklin, Edelweiss, and Parag Parikh.
Yeah, that's an interesting set of Flexicap funds, and the order of those funds as well. In terms of the different funds that you talked about, how are they different from each other when it comes to the fund manager style of managing these funds?
Yeah. I think, look, a FlexiCap fund can be extremely different in the way it operates, right? Each fund house has a very different differentiating style of operating their fund, FlexiCap fund. And this is one segment where SEBI actually provides the fund manager with enough amount of flexibility and legroom to do whatever they wish to do and the way they want to construct their portfolio. So there are no particular restrictions or regulatory limits on how much they can hold in mid cap, how much they can hold in small cap, unlike any other category, right? So out here, the flexibility is immense, and which is why we see so much of divergence in terms of performance and so much of divergence in terms of the portfolio construct. The number one style in which fund managers kind of diversify their portfolios is the market cap weightage. So technically, most of the flexi cap funds you would see are mostly large cap dominated. So they will have a large cap composition which is above 65% in the portfolio and a very minuscule composition in mid and small caps. However, there are flexi cap fund managers who are pretty evenly balanced amongst large, mid, and small cap segments, and the mid and small cap component is fairly high. So that perhaps gives a very aggressive tint to the portfolio, but that's a way of differentiating the fund, and that's the number one way in which the funds are differentiated. The number two would be the investing style of the fund manager. So let's say a JM or let's say a quant typically differentiates itself because they kind of follow a very aggressive momentum style of investing, whereas let's say an HDFC is perhaps a blend of growth plus value, and let's say a Parag Parikh is kind of again a growth plus value kind of a theme, and also has some international allocation. So that also adds a very differentiating tinge to the overall fund management way. The last point would be the overall AUM of the fund. My sense is it's not in the control of the fund manager though, but the AUM of the overall scheme kind of makes a lot of difference, and the cash position which a fund manager takes or the cash call which a fund manager takes can also be a significant driver in the overall performance of the fund. So these are few of the factors which perhaps gives a differentiating tinge to all the flexi cap funds in the industry.
Understood. And what is the kind of degree of portfolio replication or overlap in the top 5 funds that you talked about? And if somebody wants to go ahead and maybe invest in 2 FlexiCap mutual fund, firstly, is that recommended? And if yes, which 2 funds can he or she go ahead and invest in?
Look, I think that's a very interesting question. Honestly, I think if you see most of these FlexiCap funds, the degree of replication is pretty high amongst these FlexiCap funds because, as I said at the start of our conversation, that most of these FlexiCap funds are little inclined towards large cap allocation. In fact, if you see, let's say an HDFC FlexiCap fund, and let's take that as an illustration. If I were to see the portfolio replication between an HDFC and a Franklin FlexiCap fund, almost 62% of the portfolio is identical. There are 20 stocks which are common amongst the two funds, but 62% is a pretty high degree of overlap. So having an HDFC Flexicap and a Franklin Flexicap perhaps is not giving you extremely different results. It can by virtue of weightages, and it can by virtue of the other 38% of the portfolio which is differentiating. But then 62% commonality means that the returns will perhaps be fairly identical. Right. Similarly, let's say if I were to see HDFC FlexiCap with an Edelweiss FlexiCap, the portfolio replication is almost 56%, and 18 stocks are Common between, let's say, a Franklin or a Parag Parikh, the replication is 47%, with 27 names being common, and between an Edelweiss and Parag Parikh, 43% portfolio replicated, with again a very high number of stocks being common. And last, let's say a Franklin and an Edelweiss, again the portfolio replication is 60% with 22 names common. So there is a pretty high degree of overlap, and my sense is because of this overlap there is no need of having two flexicap funds in the portfolio. Ideally, one flexicap fund in any portfolio will do a lot of justice. If you really want to replicate, then perhaps you might just want to go in for a multi-cap fund, which will have a pretty high degree of mid or small. Or if you really want to add two flexicap in the portfolio, then the divergence has to be pretty wide. So let's say an HDFC and a quant, for that matter, the styles of investing are very different, and the portfolio replication is very, very low. There is only 10% commonality between the HDFC and the quant portfolio, with only five names in common. And quant is a very heavy portfolio on the mid and small cap side, and HDFC is a very heavy portfolio on the giant caps and the large cap side. So these are very diverse, very differentiating styles. Quant is a momentum style player, HDFC is a value plus growth style player. So these two can perhaps fit in, but otherwise, my sense is having two flexi caps is of no use in a portfolio if you're really going for the run of the mill flexi cap funds in the industry.
Understood. And is there a passive approach that one can take when it comes to FlexiCap mutual funds? What are the pros and cons of that?
Yeah. So look, I think the passive style of investing has kind of swept over the entire mutual fund industry for last 3 4 years, and there are passive options available across every segment, be it large cap, mid cap, small cap. But in the flexi cap segment, we didn't have too many passive options available recently. In fact, in this month itself, I think we've seen a launch from DSP, a fund called DSP Nifty 500 FlexiCap Quality 50 Index Fund. So on the overall FlexiCap theme, which is the 500 Nifty 500 basket, they will choose 50 stocks on the basis of parameter, which is what the fund will invest in. It's an index actually. The fund will invest in the index. Then there are other FlexiCap passive options which are in the proportion of 50 is to 25 is to 25, which is 50% in large cap, 25 in mid, and 25 in small. And that's also an multi-cap index which is available in the industry. So there are some passive options available out there. Having said which, the AUM of these passive FlexiCap funds is pretty small right now. These are all very recent and nascent launches. So I would rather avoid it for the time being, and I would go with an active fund in the FlexiCap category. And if I want to really give it a slightly more aggressive tinge, then I'll go in for a multi-cap fund.
And one last question from my side, and a quick one. What should your objective be when one goes ahead and buys a FlexiCap mutual fund? And in terms of the return expectations versus the benchmark, what should that be like?
Look, I think a flexi cap is a pretty can be a pretty aggressive style of investing. Out here, the investor has to be really hands off. So when an investor says that I don't want to take an active call as to what is the right time for a large, mid, or a small cap segment, or when is the right time to go overweight one market cap category vis-a-vis the other, and also when an investor says that I really don't want to shuffle very frantically between these categories, that's the time when you select a flexi cap fund and give this mandate to a professional fund manager so that he or she can actively rebalance your portfolios across market caps, across market segments and sectors. So that's the first approach. Second, I think it's a pretty steady part of any portfolio over a long period of time. So if you have a portfolio with a 5 10 year horizon, or if you're building a portfolio for your retirement goal, then I think FlexiCap is a category which is the first and the foremost inclusion in any portfolio, because it kind of captures the essence of entire market, right? And how to judge a FlexiCap? That's a tricky one. Look, honestly, the right benchmark is Nifty 500. Having said which, Nifty 500, the composition of top 100 companies is almost 74% of the market cap. And the next 150 companies, which is the mid cap segment, covers almost like 18%, and the small cap is hardly 6 to 8% of market cap in the Nifty 500. So finding a fund which exactly replicates this composition might be a little tough because FlexiCap funds keep churning very highly between the mid small segments. But the closest replica is Nifty 500, and the ideal benchmark would be that the fund has to clearly beat Nifty 500 by at least 1 or 2 percentage points on an year-on-year basis to be part of your inclusion. So that's the right benchmark to have.
Right, Mohit, thank you so much for giving us those insights and, of course, taking out the time and speaking with us at NDTV Profit.